The church bells should have been singing. Instead, silence weighed heavy like stone. Amelia Hayes stood at the altar, veil trembling as though it carried her heartbeat. The polished wood beneath her feet felt suddenly foreign, like a stage she had been tricked into stepping onto. Rows of faces turned toward her, friends, distant relatives, and strangers she had been told to smile for. But there was no groom. Her fiancé, Daniel Carter, heir to a family of wealth and prestige, was missing. 10 minutes late. 20, 30. The whispers grew claws. The priest leaned close. "We can wait a few more minutes, Miss Hayes." Amelia nodded, but her chest already knew the truth. He wasn't coming. Her flowers slipped from her hands and landed with a muted thud, petals scattering like tiny white shouts of betrayal. The organist's fingers rested in silence. Amelia wanted to scream, but no sound came. Her throat burned with humiliation. The perfect dress, the perfect day, the dream she had carried since childhood, it all crumbled in front of hundreds of eyes. And then, as she turned toward the church doors, unable to breathe another second of pity, a figure stepped inside. Tall, sharp-suited, with eyes that saw her pain instantly. His voice was calm, almost unshakable. "You've been abandoned, but maybe I can give you something he couldn't." The room froze. Amelia blinked, stunned. "I need a woman," he continued, his tone steady but urgent. "And you need a home." The church bells were meant to carry joy that morning, but instead they hung silent in the thick summer air. The scent of lilies pressed heavy against Amelia Hayes's chest. As she stood before the altar, her wedding gown pooling like fragile snow at her feet, dozens of eyes fixed on her, expectant, then confused, then worried. The organist's hands had already fallen away from the keys. The priest cleared his throat, but the sound felt like thunder in the suffocating quiet. Amelia's pulse throbbed in her ears, every second louder than the last. She tried to smile. She tried to believe. "He's just late," she whispered to herself, but the words had no strength. Her bridesmaids glanced at one another with tight expressions, their bouquets trembling in hands that weren't supposed to tremble. Her mother sat stiff in the front pew, jaw clenched so hard Amelia thought it might shatter. Her father avoided her gaze entirely, staring at the stained glass windows as if answers lived in the painted saints. Minutes stretched into eternity. 10, 15, 20. With each tick of the clock above the altar, hope slipped further away. Amelia's throat burned. The dream she had crafted since childhood, the vows, the promises, the family dinner tables where she imagined growing old with him. All of it cracked like fragile glass. Her fiancé, Daniel Carter, wasn't coming. The whispers turned into a low hum, a river of pity and disbelief coursing through the pews. She couldn't breathe in that river. The bouquet slid from her grip and landed with a muffled thud against the aisle, white petals scattering across the polished wood like broken promises. Her vision blurred. Every face in the church became a blur of pitying eyes and hushed voices. She had been abandoned before them all, left standing in the place where love was supposed to last forever. She turned her head toward the heavy doors at the back of the church. If she could just walk, if she could just put one foot in front of the other, maybe she could escape the humiliation burning through her veins. Her shoes felt like anchors, but she lifted her skirt and forced herself to take one step, then another, then another. Every pew she passed carried a weight of judgment and sorrow. By the time she reached the last step before freedom, she was trembling so hard she thought she might collapse. And then the doors opened. A man entered, tall, composed, and unlike anyone Amelia had ever seen. The light from outside haloed around him, making him look almost unreal against the shadowed church. His suit was tailored to precision, dark as midnight, but it was his eyes that struck her steady, piercing, seeing her pain without a word. He did not look at the audience. He did not look at the priest. His gaze was fixed only on her. The murmurs rose again, sharper now, as though the congregation understood something Amelia did not. Her heart stumbled in her chest. She expected him to step aside, to let her leave, but he did not move from the center of the aisle. He walked forward, each step unhurried, deliberate, as though he had been waiting for this exact moment. When he reached her, the silence deepened, so heavy it pressed against her skin. Amelia swallowed hard, clutching the edge of her gown. She had no words, no breath, only the echo of her heart. His voice broke the stillness, low and unwavering. "You've been left alone." She blinked, stunned, tears slipping hot and unchecked down her face. "But maybe," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers, "maybe I can give you something he never could." The church gasped as one, a living body of shock. Amelia's breath caught. The stranger's tone carried no cruelty, no mockery, only certainty, as though he had stepped into this moment with purpose. "I need a woman," he said quietly, but the words rolled through the church like a vow. "And you need a home." For the first time since the bells had failed to ring, Amelia's heart skipped for a different reason. The world swayed around her, fragile and surreal, yet his presence rooted her. She didn't know his name, she didn't know his story, but she knew one thing with startling clarity: nothing about her life would ever be the same again. Her breath trembled, her tears still fresh, and the church full of eyes waited to see what she would do. Would she walk away, or step into the unknown with the man who had appeared when everything else had fallen apart? The silence stretched, holding its breath with hers, and that was the moment Amelia Hayes's life changed forever. The sun outside the church was blinding, harsh against Amelia's swollen eyes as she stumbled into the street. She didn't know how her feet carried her there. Everything moved in fragments, blurred voices behind her, the echo of the stranger's words, the sting of betrayal she couldn't shake. The warm summer air should have comforted her, but it only magnified the cold hollowness in her chest. She had been left, humiliated, and now she was lost. But the stranger didn't let her slip away. She heard his footsteps behind her, calm and measured, until he came to stand at her side. He didn't speak at first, and that silence unnerved her more than words. He simply stood, hands at his sides, his presence steady in the chaos swirling around her. When he finally spoke, his tone was even, almost gentle. "You don't deserve this." Amelia wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. "What do I deserve then?" Her voice cracked, brittle as glass. "To be pitied, to be whispered about for years, to spend the rest of my life being remembered as the woman who was abandoned at the altar." The stranger studied her, his gaze unwavering. "No, you deserve more than that. But sometimes more doesn't come the way you expect." Her eyes narrowed, searching his expression. "And you think you're the one who can give me that more?" "I know I can," he said, without hesitation. There was no arrogance in his tone, only certainty. "But what I offer isn't what you think." She looked at him fully then, really looked. His jaw was sharp, his eyes a storm of gray and steel. But there was something hidden beneath the surface, something restless, something broken. He was not just a man in control of his world. He was a man carrying a weight of his own. "Who are you?" she whispered. His lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. "Someone who understands what it means to be left behind. My name is Nathaniel Grant." The name struck her. She had heard it before on news channels, in hushed conversations about mergers and skyscrapers, the kind of name people both feared and admired. Billionaire, philanthropist, the man whose fortune seemed unshakable. But here, standing in the middle of a cobblestone street, he was no headline. He was simply a man offering her something she didn't yet understand. Amelia drew a shaky breath, clutching her gown to her chest. "Why me? Why now? You don't even know me." Nathaniel's gaze softened, just slightly. "Because sometimes life throws people into your path at the exact moment they need each other most. You think you've lost everything, but maybe this isn't an ending. Maybe it's the beginning." The words pressed against her raw heart. She wanted to turn away, to dismiss him, but something inside her wouldn't let her. His certainty frightened her, but it also sparked something unfamiliar, a flicker of curiosity, of hope she didn't want to admit was still alive. "I don't need saving," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "Good," Nathaniel replied, "because I'm not offering to save you. I'm offering a choice, a chance, nothing more." He stepped back then, giving her space, his eyes never breaking from hers. "You have every right to walk away, to start over on your own. But if you're willing to hear me out, I can give you something you don't have right now: stability, a place to belong, a way forward when the world just slammed the door in your face." Amelia's hands shook as she gripped the folds of her gown. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind, each louder than the last. Could she trust him? Was this madness? Was she really standing in the street, discussing her future with a man she had just met while her shattered wedding still echoed in the church behind her? And yet, when he extended his hand, not demanding, not forcing, just offering, she hesitated. Her chest rose and fell with uneven breaths, but her feet didn't move away. "What do you want in return?" she asked finally, her voice sharp with suspicion. His answer was calm, honesty, and presence. "I need someone willing to stand beside me, someone who understands loneliness as much as I do. I'm not asking for love, not yet. I'm asking for a partnership, one that can help us both." The word partnership echoed in her ears. It sounded cold, transactional, yet the way he spoke it carried something warmer, something human. For a long moment, she stood frozen, torn between running and reaching for his hand. Then, as if guided by something she couldn't name, Amelia placed her trembling fingers against his. His grip closed around hers, steady, unshaking, grounding her when everything else was slipping away. The murmurs of the churchgoers spilled out through the doors, a chorus of judgment and speculation. But she no longer cared. For the first time since Daniel had abandoned her, she felt a strange sense of control, not over the situation, but over herself. Nathaniel's eyes held hers, and in that connection, an unspoken promise passed between them. Whatever lay ahead, it would not be ordinary. As they walked away from the church together, whispers followed like shadows, but Amelia kept her gaze forward. The path was unclear, frightening, and full of risk, but she couldn't deny the truth stirring inside her. Her life had already been rewritten, and this man was the pen. Behind her, the bells finally rang, far too late to announce a wedding, but just in time to mark the beginning of something entirely unexpected. The city lights glimmered like scattered stars across the skyline as Amelia sat in the back seat of Nathaniel's sleek black car, her wedding gown bunched awkwardly round her knees. The leather smelled of cedar and quiet power, the kind of luxury she had only seen in magazines or glimpsed from afar. Every sound outside, the hum of traffic, the honking horns, the murmur of strangers on sidewalks, seemed distant, muffled by the storm raging inside her chest. She had no idea why she was here, sitting beside a man she barely knew, her entire life crumbling behind her. Nathaniel sat across from her, calm, composed, his eyes fixed on the glowing horizon beyond the tinted glass. He hadn't said much since they left the church, only offered her a small bottle of water and a steady silence that somehow spoke more than words. Amelia clutched the bottle in her hands, her knuckles pale against the crystal-clear plastic, and finally broke the quiet. "This is insane." Her voice was hushed but sharp. "I don't even know you. I don't even know why I'm here." Nathaniel turned his gaze toward her, steady and unreadable, "because the place you just left wasn't yours anymore, and because, whether you realize it yet or not, you didn't want to be there a second longer." Amelia pressed her lips together. Anger surged, not at him, but at herself. He was right. She hadn't wanted to stand in that church another moment. Not with those eyes staring at her, not with pity suffocating her like smoke. But admitting that truth out loud felt like surrendering to the madness of what she was doing now. "You talk like you know me," she said bitterly. "I don't," Nathaniel admitted without hesitation. "But I know what it looks like when someone's world collapses, and I know the look of someone who's desperate to keep from drowning." His words struck deep, as though he had peeled away the last of her fragile defenses. She looked away, focusing on the blur of neon signs streaking past the car windows. For years, she had been the steady one, the dependable one, the woman who smiled politely at dinners and bent herself into the shape her fiancé wanted. She had played the role so well that she almost believed it was who she was meant to be. Until he left, until her world cracked open and revealed how hollow it really was. The car slowed as they approached towering glass buildings that seemed to scrape the sky itself. Nathaniel's world, his territory. Amelia's stomach tightened as the driver pulled into a private garage, and within minutes, she found herself stepping into a marble lobby that gleamed with elegance and wealth. Every inch of it intimidated her, made her feel small in her tattered gown and tear-stained face. But Nathaniel walked beside her with the same quiet steadiness, nodding briefly to the staff, who bowed their heads in respect as he passed. No one questioned the sight of the disheveled bride at his side. No one dared dot in the elevator. Silence stretched again. Amelia fiddled with her fingers, fighting the rising tide of nerves. "So what now?" she asked softly. "You've dragged me out of my disaster of a wedding and into whatever this is. What happens next?" Nathaniel's eyes held hers, his expression unreadable. "Now," he said, his voice calm, "you rest, you breathe. You let yourself exist without everyone else's expectations pressing down on you. And when you're ready, we'll talk about what comes after." His words should have comforted her, but they only stirred more questions. She wanted to demand answers, to know what he really wanted from her. But the elevator doors opened, and her breath caught. They stepped into a penthouse that stretched wider than any house she had ever lived in. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the entire city glowing beneath the night sky. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting golden light across polished wood and velvet furniture. It was beautiful, breathtaking, and utterly foreign. Amelia stood, frozen in the doorway, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it. "I don't belong here," she whispered. Nathaniel moved past her, setting his jacket over the back of a chair. "Neither do I," he said quietly, almost as if speaking to himself. Then he looked at her again, his eyes steady. "But sometimes belonging isn't about where you come from. It's about what you build." The words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning she didn't yet understand. Amelia wrapped her arms around herself, the gown suffocating, too heavy, with memories she wanted to shed. Nathaniel seemed to notice because he gestured toward a door down the hall. "There's a guest room prepared. Clothes will be sent up for you. You don't have to decide anything tonight. Just rest." His tone held no pressure, no demand, only a kind of weary kindness she didn't expect from a man like him. Amelia hesitated, her throat tight. She had nowhere else to go, no one to call, no home that wouldn't be filled with questions and judgment. Against every instinct that told her she was leaping into danger, she nodded and followed his direction. Hours later, as she lay in a bed softer than clouds, staring at a ceiling painted with shadows from the city lights, her thoughts refused to settle. She should have felt fear. She should have felt regret. Instead, she felt something stranger: curiosity. Who was Nathaniel Grant really? What was the pain behind his steady eyes? Why had he chosen her, of all people, in that church? At that moment, sleep pulled at her, but her heart whispered a truth she could not ignore. This was not a coincidence. Their meeting was a spark, and sparks either burned out or started fires that could not be contained. And somewhere in the next room, Nathaniel stared out at the city in silence, his glass untouched in his hand. He, too, knew their story had only just begun. Morning light spilled through the vast windows, painting soft gold across the room where Amelia stirred. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The sheets were too smooth, the air too still, and the faint hum of the city below too unfamiliar. Then it all rushed back: the church, the silence, the humiliation, the stranger who had appeared at her lowest moment, and the impossible choice she had made to follow him. She sat up slowly, her body wrapped in borrowed silk pajamas instead of the suffocating weight of her wedding gown. A tray rested on the bedside table, arranged with fresh fruit, warm bread, and a pot of tea still steaming. She hadn't eaten since the night before, but her stomach twisted as if food was both a comfort and a reminder of how hollow she felt. Her hand hovered over the cup when a knock came at the door. She froze. Nathaniel's voice carried through, calm and even. "May I come in?" Amelia's throat tightened. She wasn't used to being asked. Daniel had never asked, he had simply expected. "Yes," she managed softly. The door opened, and Nathaniel stepped inside. No suit this time, just a crisp white shirt and rolled sleeves that made him seem less like a towering figure of power, and more like a man. He glanced at the untouched tray, then at her pale face. "You should eat," he said simply. Amelia swallowed hard. "I don't think I can." Nathaniel crossed the room but didn't sit. He leaned against the edge of the dresser, giving her distance. "Then at least drink the tea. You need strength for what's coming." Her eyes snapped to his. "And what exactly is coming?" You pulled me out of my wedding, brought me here, and offered me a partnership without explaining what that even means. If you expect me to just play along, I can't." He didn't flinch. "You're right. You deserve an explanation." He paused, as though choosing words carefully. "I didn't bring you here out of pity. I brought you here because I need someone the world doesn't expect, someone who isn't already tangled in it. I need someone who knows what it feels like to be broken and still stand up again." Confusion flickered across her face. "For what? Business? Some sort of arrangement?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened, but his eyes never wavered. "For life," he said softly. "For more than business. My world is full of people who smile for cameras but would stab for power. I don't need another polished mask. I need someone real." Amelia's chest tightened. His words carried a weight that unsettled her. She had been reduced to an ornament in her old relationship, valued only for appearances. Now, here was a man who spoke of her scars as though they were worth something. Still, doubt coiled inside her. "You don't even know me. You saw me fall apart for one night. That's hardly enough to decide I'm what you need." Nathaniel's gaze softened. "You're right again. I don't know you, but I saw something. In you most people hide a refusal to crumble, even when you had every reason to. That's what I need." The silence stretched, heavy with truth she wasn't ready to accept. Amelia turned away, staring out the window at the endless city. She didn't belong here. Yet the thought of leaving tightened her chest even more than the thought of staying. Later that afternoon, Nathaniel asked her to join him. She hesitated, but curiosity pulled her forward. He led her through gleaming corridors to a private office lined with shelves of books and maps. A massive desk sat at the center, covered with files and photographs. "This," Nathaniel said, gesturing to the spread before him, "is the world I live in. Every deal, every merger, every headline you've ever read, it all passes through here." He studied her reaction. "But what you won't find in those files is the truth. Every empire has shadows. Mine is no exception." Amelia's breath caught as she scanned the papers. Numbers, contracts, names she recognized from news reports. It felt like stepping into a storm. Dangerous and electric. "I need someone beside me," Nathaniel continued. "Not to crunch numbers or sign deals, but to remind me what matters when the shadows get too loud. To keep me grounded." His eyes met hers, steady and searching. "That's why I offered you a partnership, because I can't keep fighting this alone." Amelia shook her head, overwhelmed. "But why me? Why not someone already in your circle? Someone who understands this world?" "Because they're part of the problem," Nathaniel said firmly. "And because you don't see me as a headline. You see me as a man." Her chest ached with conflict. Part of her wanted to run, to escape this glittering, dangerous world. But another part, a part she barely recognized, leaned toward him, drawn by the honesty in his words. That night, Amelia found herself pacing the guest room, her mind a storm. He had given her no promises of love, only of purpose. Could she step into his world and hold her own? Could she risk her heart again, after it had been shattered so brutally? When she finally paused at the window, the city glowing like a sea of stars below, she whispered to herself, "Maybe this isn't about what I've lost. Maybe it's about what I could find." In the quiet of the penthouse, Nathaniel stood alone in his study, staring at a photograph tucked away in a drawer one no one else knew he kept. A family lost, a life broken long before Amelia. His hand trembled as he closed the drawer and whispered words only the empty room could hear. "This time," he murmured, "I won't let it all fall apart." Two souls, scarred in different ways, now tied by fate neither had planned. And though neither spoke it out loud, both felt the same truth. The storm had only just begun. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm Amelia had never known before. Nathaniel's world moved fast, filled with meetings in glass towers, whispers of deals that carried the weight of nations, and dinners where every smile had a motive. She walked beside him, uncertain at first, her presence questioned by those who circled him. They looked at her as though she were a puzzle piece from the wrong box, out of place, unfit, disposable. But Nathaniel never flinched, never once let their disapproval sway him. Wherever he went, he made sure she was at his side. At first, Amelia thought it was only for appearances, a shield, perhaps, against the rumors of his solitary life. But as the days turned into weeks, she noticed the small ways he leaned on her, asking for her opinion in meetings, pausing when her expression shifted, listening to her in a way no one else seemed capable of. For the first time in years, she wasn't being spoken over or sculpted into someone else's idea of perfection. She was simply heard. Yet with every step deeper into his world, Amelia felt the shadows gathering. She saw it in the guarded way Nathaniel carried himself when he thought no one was looking, the late-night phone calls that ended in clenched fists, the files that disappeared from his desk whenever she walked in. He wanted her close, but he was keeping something locked away, and the weight of it pressed between them. One evening, as rain lashed against the windows of the penthouse, she finally confronted him. "You keep saying you need me beside you," she said quietly, her voice trembling but firm, "but you don't trust me with the truth. What are you hiding, Nathaniel?" For the first time since she met him, his composure cracked. His jaw tightened, his eyes darkened, and he turned away, staring out at the storm. "Some truths," he said slowly, "aren't meant to be shared. Not yet." The words cut deeper than she expected. She crossed her arms, her chest tightening with frustration. "Then how am I supposed to stand beside you if you won't let me see the battles you're fighting?" His silence was answer enough. That night, Amelia lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Doubt gnawed at her. She had left one man who abandoned her at the altar, and now she was entangled with another who, despite his strength, seemed unable to let her fully in. Was she just repeating her mistakes, clinging to someone who would never truly choose her? The next morning, her doubts grew louder when a headline splashed across every screen in the city. "Nathaniel Grant, under investigation for corporate misconduct." The article painted him as ruthless, accused him of betraying his shareholders, hinted at corruption. The photograph showed him looking cold, untouchable. And though Amelia had seen another side of him, the world was eager to believe the worst. When she confronted him, holding the newspaper with shaking hands, his response was curt. "It's noise. They'll say what they want. Don't waste your energy on lies." "But they don't look like lies," she whispered. His eyes met hers, hard and unyielding. "Do you trust me?" The question sliced through her. Did she? Trust wasn't something that bloomed easily in the ruins of betrayal, and Nathaniel's walls made it even harder. She wanted to believe in him, in the man who had reached for her when no one else did. But the storm around him was growing, and she was caught in the middle of it. That evening, an invitation arrived, an exclusive gala hosted by one of Nathaniel's fiercest rivals. Amelia felt the weight of the envelope as if it were a test. Nathaniel asked her to come with him. His tone calm, but his eyes carried a challenge. "People will be watching," he said. "They'll look for cracks. If you're with me, you need to stand firm, not just for me, but for yourself." The gala was a battlefield disguised as a ballroom. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, and laughter rippled through the air like thinly veiled daggers. Every eye turned toward them as they entered, Nathaniel in his sharp black suit, Amelia in a gown chosen for her by his staff. She felt the weight of those stares, the whispers that buzzed like hornets at his side. She stood taller than she thought she could, but the night was merciless. People approached with sly smiles, probing questions, subtle insults dressed as compliments. They spoke to Nathaniel as though she weren't there, then to her as though she were only a decoration. And yet, Nathaniel's hand remained steady at her back, his quiet strength anchoring her, until one woman, with a smile too sharp to be kind, leaned close and whispered, "He'll ruin you, just like he ruins everything else. You'll see." The words pierced deeper than Amelia wanted to admit. Later, away from the glittering crowd, she found Nathaniel on the balcony. The city stretched wide below. His shoulders were tense, his jaw rigid. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Tell me the truth. Whatever this is, whatever they're saying, if I'm going to stay, I need to know. I need you to let me in." Nathaniel turned, his eyes stormy. "And if the truth destroys everything you believe about me, then at least it's real." She whispered back, "At least I won't be standing in the dark." For a long moment, he said nothing. The rain of the city lights shimmered around them, the distance between them heavy with what was unsaid. Finally, he stepped closer, his voice low and raw. I didn't build this empire clean. I made choices, hard ones, ugly ones. Some saved lives, some hurt people, and now those choices are circling back. Amelia's breath caught, fear and compassion colliding in her chest. He had finally cracked the door to his truth, but what waited on the other side threatened to swallow them both. She looked into his eyes, steady despite the storm around them. Then let me carry it with you. Don't push me away, Nathaniel. Not like he did. The mention of her past, of Daniel, lingered between them like a ghost. Nathaniel's hand lifted, hovering near hers, and for the first time his voice faltered. I don't know if I can let anyone that close again. Her heart ached, but she didn't pull back. Instead, she whispered, then this is where you decide. If I'm beside you, I'm beside all of it, the shadows, the scars, everything. But if you shut me out, you'll lose me before you ever had me. The night air pressed cold against them as Nathaniel stood torn, his world of steel and shadows colliding with the one fragile thing he had tried to resist. And Amelia, with her trembling hands and unbroken resolve, became the mirror he could no longer ignore. The battle was no longer outside in the headlines or in the boardrooms. It was here, in this fragile space between them, where trust could either be forged or shattered forever. The city was alive with restless energy that night, but in Nathaniel's penthouse, the silence felt heavier than any noise. Amelia stood near the window, her reflection ghosted against the skyline, her heart thundering with the weight of everything left unsaid. She had given him a choice to let her in or lose her, and now the hours stretched endlessly, each second gnawing at her resolve. Behind her, Nathaniel paced, his presence a storm contained within human form. He looked powerful as always, but there was a fracture in him now, one she had glimpsed beneath his carefully built armor. He was a man caught between worlds, the ruthless empire he had built with his own hands, and the fragile chance at something real standing before him. Finally, he stopped. Do you know what it costs to hold everything together? His voice was low, raw, stripped of the composure he usually carried. To build something so vast that it consumes you, until there's nothing left but the fight to keep it standing. Amelia turned, her breath trembling. Yes, it costs pieces of yourself. And if you give away too many, there's nothing left to hold on to. The truth in her words pierced him. His eyes darkened, but not with anger, more with recognition. That's why I didn't want to let you in. Because I've already lost too much. Because if you walk away, I don't know what's left of me. Her heart broke at his confession, but it also strengthened her. She stepped closer, her voice steady. Then stop pushing me to the edge of the door. Let me through it. Let me stand in the mess with you. That's the only way this works. Nathaniel studied her, searching for doubt, for weakness, but all he saw was resolve. Slowly, as though it cost him every ounce of control, he reached for her hand. The contact was simple, yet it carried the weight of an empire's worth of battles. His grip was firm but trembling, and in that trembling Amelia felt the truth. He wasn't untouchable. He wasn't invincible. He was human. For the first time since that fateful day in the church, Amelia's chest loosened. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was choosing, and so was he. In the days that followed, their fragile truce was tested. The storm of accusations in the press intensified, with headlines screaming about corruption, betrayal, and impending downfall. Nathaniel's empire teetered, his rivals circling like wolves. The very people who once toasted to his victories now whispered of his ruin. And yet, Amelia stayed. She faced the stares, the cruel words, the questions dripping with venom. When they tried to rattle her, she stood taller, not because she had all the answers, but because she refused to let them see her break. The woman who had been abandoned at the altar was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone forged in fire, someone unafraid of the unknown. Nathaniel watched her with quiet awe. He had expected her to crumble under the weight of his world, but instead she rose, carrying her own scars like armor. She became the one thing he hadn't realized he needed, a reminder that strength wasn't built from power, but from resilience. One evening, after a brutal day of negotiations that left even Nathaniel weary, they returned to the penthouse. Amelia moved through the rooms with quiet confidence now. no longer the outsider who had trembled in borrowed clothes. She belonged not because she fit the mold, but because she had reshaped it. Nathaniel found her on the balcony, the city lights painting, her face in gold. For a moment, he simply watched, the heaviness in his chest replaced by something rare and unfamiliar. He stepped beside her, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "You should hate me for dragging you into this." Amelia turned, her lips curving faintly. "I don't. Because you didn't drag me. I chose this. I chose you." Her words cut through him like light through darkness. He had spent years building walls so high that no one could climb them. Yet here she was, not tearing them down, but standing on the other side, because he had finally opened a door. He reached for her then, not with the distance of a man making a deal, but with the vulnerability of someone who had finally found a place to rest. Their hands intertwined, and the weight of the world seemed, for just a moment, to ease. The days ahead would not be easy. There would be trials, betrayals, and battles neither could yet see. But they had faced the breaking point and chosen to stand together. That choice, fragile and imperfect, was stronger than any contract, stronger than any empire. As the night deepened, Amelia leaned her head against Nathaniel's shoulder, her voice a whisper carried on the wind. "You found me when I thought I was lost forever." Nathaniel closed his eyes, his heart unsteady but alive in a way it hadn't been for years. "No," he murmured, "you found me." And with that, two souls scarred by abandonment and shadows discovered the rarest of gifts, not the perfection they once thought they needed, but the courage to begin again. The city roared on below them, unaware of the quiet transformation happening high above. But Amelia and Nathaniel knew. Their story was no longer about what had been lost. It was about what had been found too. People, broken but unbowed, daring to believe that even in the ruins, love could rise.